And so it's not so much that there's a smoking gun that like that proves that there's a cover up, but it's that if there wasn't a cover up, none of these things would be happening. The only reason I can think of wanting the gag order is to keep the narrative clean. Case closed, right? The parents should be at least, you know, somewhere available for comment or for access.
Ian Carroll insists that the FBI's Charlie Kirk assassination narrative just doesn't make sense. And in this clip, he goes on the Elizabeth Lane show and talks about the loose ends, the things that the FBI can't get straight, why there is a gag order, and what that tells us about the FBI's bungling of this case, if you can call it that, and not a cover-up. So let's get to the bottom of this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
So let's start with what are the new developments and what is your take on them? And then I want to establish some kind of timeline and tell people the story of Charlie Kirk's assassination from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, there's some important distinctions to draw at the start too, in terms of where is evidence coming from, what evidence can you trust, what degree of confidence can you assign to that trust, and what does each piece of evidence actually mean? Because it's great that we're dealing with this in an open, sort of free environment on the internet, and that we have independent journalists kind of analyzing everything together, but that does also lead to a lot of questionable evidence that we don't really have verified getting run all the way out, as well as evidence that might mean something, but sort of might get over-interpreted as meaning more than we necessarily know it does, that then gets run all the way out. So it's easy for people to kind of think there are facts in the case that we really don't know as facts yet, or think there's things we don't know that we do have evidence about.
Yeah, that's really true. Actually, I'll hand it to him on that one. We have knowledge that the FBI probably has a lot more that they haven't released that will come out if it goes to trial and would be shared with the defense team during discovery. If it does get to that point, I have my doubts that it gets to that point. But they presented evidence that they think, you know, is particularly compelling in that indictment document. There might be more than that. There might be exculpatory evidence we don't have. Of course, it's the FBI writing this narrative right now. We haven't really heard anything from the defense team. Let's see what they produce, or if they're going to contest some of the most controversial aspects in any way, like the text messages, you know, the parents' involvement in turning him in, etc. We just don't know the whole story yet. And what we do know is bits and pieces, but what I can say is if the information that the FBI provided, you know, doesn't face scrutiny from the defense team, this kid's going away for life. But if they did taint or doctor the text messages, lie about the fact that the parents turned him in, that's more than just an error. That's the kind of thing that would make someone walk and really disrupt the patsy narrative. So we'll have to see where this goes.
And yeah, we're in this interesting time now where a lot of the official releases have already happened, and Kash Patel has been very clear that he sort of is done with the public disclosure of this case. So now the new developments that are coming out from leaks and from the public square and from various journalists and whistleblowers. A lot of it is coming from Candace, although she's been on a break for the last 2 weeks. And a lot of it is coming from like whatever new video is hitting X today. And it's hard to always verify exactly how much we should trust each piece of evidence. And so there sort of is a crowdsourced analysis of each individual piece that's being done.
That's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be the way of the new media landscape, by the way, with the deep state and the FBI not being trusted by more and more Americans, it seems like, on the daily. And who would trust the organization that tried to convince Martin Luther King to commit suicide and wiretapped him and Malcolm X and Stokely Carmichael and murdered Fred Hampton and destroyed the life of Richard Jewell and burned women and children alive in Waco when they could have arrested Koresh out on his daily walks? Yeah, we're not trusting that organization, the same one that covered up the Epstein files and the Epstein scandal, which they're doubling down on. So yeah, that's the reason for these new pieces of information, one of which includes someone from inside the administration, Joe Kent, one of the top advisors to Tulsi Gabbard, saying, hey, FBI, look at these potential angles involving foreign influence in the Charlie Kirk assassination. Well, you know, no cares from the FBI. Kash Patel brushed him aside, said, no, we're shutting this down. We're not going to explore it. Despite the fact that Kash Patel went on Twitter to say, hey, all these angles that people are bringing up on the internet, we're going to explore them. Nope. Shut door. They won't explore them. So even when it comes from within the administration, searching for alternatives is just not being done by the FBI. They're set on this narrative.
Easy to me how they, we'll talk about the gag order and we'll talk about how Kesh Patel just conveniently says that, you know what, guys, even though Charlie was a public figure loved by, all these young Americans, you get to know nothing about this case. Just trust us because FBI has established this amazing history of, always telling us the truth, right? So it's ridiculous. But I do want to talk about gag order. Why do you think they needed a gag order to shut people up? Like, why now? Were we too close?
That is the $1 million question, isn't it? Because we don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's not out there yet. We don't know what might be being protected. And, there are good reasons to have a gag order in a limited way in certain types of investigations. There's perfectly legitimate reasons for that. But the way that this gag order is structured and the way that the new judge, by the way, seemed to speak about it in court verbally, sort of implied that the gag order it might and maybe does apply to everyone that was a witness, everyone that was there, everyone that was involved, everyone that is a potential witness, which is completely insane and unprecedented for the most part, as far as I can tell.
He's actually pretty right about that. This is one of the most sweeping gag orders in U.S. criminal justice history, from what I can gather online. Now, to steelman this, what they are saying is they're doing this such that they don't taint the jury pool. Because if 3,000 witnesses, and that's what they say they have in this case, are all talking, so much information will spread to the public that hasn't spread yet. And yeah, a lot of it has spread. That alone could taint the jury pool. It's a very high publicity case, maybe the most prominent political assassination of my lifetime, and maybe since RFK and Martin Luther King. That their sense is that they will have trouble even creating a pool of jurors if that much information leaks. And there's plausible reason to believe that in cases such as this. But this gag order doesn't extend to family members, from what I can determine online too. So the family could talk if they really wanted to. They've been very silent, but that could have plausible explanations too. It's possible that the defense team, headed by Catherine Nestor, says, hey, don't talk to anyone, no matter what, no matter for whatever reason, because that could tarnish our legal strategy. Very true when they're so closely associated with how Tyler Robinson apparently turned himself in.
And so to me, it looks like the FBI has put out what limited information it's going to put out, and that was not satisfactory to the public at all. It actually inspired more questions and conspiracy theories and speculation than when we knew nothing. And now that they have sort of finished putting out any information from, the official channels, we're in this period before the trial, after official disclosure. And I suspect that there's certain things that they don't want getting out. Clearly, they've not wanted students speaking about their on-the-ground experience at all. Almost all mainstream reporting found anyone but students to talk to, whether it's like ex-politicians or, security people or turning point people.
From another campus.
Almost no students got to speak. And there's also an element of what other footage might be out there and what might that get in the way of. The only reason I can think of wanting the gag order is to keep the narrative clean. Because if you're worried about contaminating the jury pool, the jury trial, that's pretty well already done by the FBI, releasing strange conflicting evidence that is only half of what is sort of we need in order to clarify what's going on. All sorts of bizarre statements by Governor Cox, back and forth with what official law enforcement statements are. So the jury pool is already going to have all kinds of contamination regardless.
Yeah, he's right about that, actually, but it doesn't mean that a gag order would prevent even more tainting of a prospective jury pool. So I think he's right, but I also think it's wrong to say that there's no reason, in terms of looking at this as a steel man, that there would be a gag order. Yeah, this is a very highly publicized crime. Lots of people are following it. Lots of people were following it in the news. But I'm telling you, there is a niche that's really, really into this story as much as, say, me and Elizabeth and Ian, that doesn't represent the broader American public that hasn't looked into this indictment document that I've read, several times. Many people watching this, I bet, have read that too, that have followed what Kash Patel has said about this, into the deepest intricacies of this. And if you don't have a gag order, there's going to be a significant amount of time until this trial in which, everyone hears this and that and the other thing from 3,000 witnesses. That would have a bigger impact than the amount that it's already tarnished people right now. Just something for your consideration.
So it's hard to make that justification for this gag order.
Yeah, and this whole lawyer case, as you know, I've been on this, very, very close. And this whole lawyer case is really bizarre for me because when the whole thing happened, I knew the best thing to do is to get close to Tyler Robinson because nothing else matters, right? The only person that really can tell us what's going on is Tyler Robinson. So we can talk about all the videos and how he jumped and when he jumped, was there a gun? I don't care. The only person with answers right now is Tyler Robinson. So
I don't know if I agree with this. He was close to his boyfriend, Lance Twigg, who supposedly was transitioning. It seems like he didn't take too much to alter his personal appearance in that direction, but certainly was. We know from Discord links that Discord leaks by Turkey Tom, he talked about this in a recent video, more about his personal life and spending it with Lance. But not only that, but the parents were involved in turning this guy in and giving the FBI information, like in this indictment document when they said they identified him in the footage. It was them that identified him in the footage and then, confronted him with this, and with the help of a family friend sat down and talked to him about it. They also said, his mother said that he was becoming more left-leaning, more pro-gay and trans rights-oriented. And we don't know if there's an affidavit that exists of, the parents signing a statement to the effect. They might have even had that in the FBI before they even indicted and pressed charges against them. We don't know that. But all I'm saying is there are answers by a lot of people outside of Tyler that are important to this story, certainly so. And I think it's a mistake to say it's all confined to Tyler. Now, would I like Tyler and his defense team to speak and refute anything they think is wrong with the FBI's narrative? Yeah, of course I do, and that will happen if it goes to trial, certainly so. But, that's the truth too. It's not just Tyler.
So I was sitting at home thinking, okay, how am I going to do this? Like, how am I going to visit this guy? Because as soon as I submit a letter in prison, they're not going to allow me to even get close because I'm a journalist. So how else can I do it? And I decided, why don't I get this poor guy a lawyer? Issue here will be the qualification because we are not qualified to represent somebody on a death row, right? That's a specific qualification that you need. So I was advised to get someone from New York. And this person, I'm not going to say his name because I don't know if he approves me to say that. So he's exceptionally good. Everyone knows him in New York, and not just New York, but, nationwide, because he represented some very, very important people in different lawsuits. So I ended up calling him and he listened to my story. He thought it was incredibly interesting and thinking out of the box. So he was like, yeah, I'm definitely going to represent this guy. So here's what you need to do. Why don't you somehow get in touch with parents or someone or just Tyler Robinson himself? Because I need to have a consent from him to represent him. I can't solicit clients, right? So I'm like, all right, well, let's do this. I cannot explain to you enough how hard it was for me to get in touch with any of his relative or friends or Tyler Robinson himself. Now, there is something undergoing, so I cannot talk about that part of the investigation. We are trying to do something to rectify this. But why should that be so hard?
Well, I think there's plausible reason if the defense team is telling them not to talk to anyone, and many of them are probably in witness protection programs that don't, give them the means to even interact with many people in the outside world right now. This is turning a whole family upside down, absolutely so. And the defense team involved would likely be smart and savvy if they're telling people that were associated with this, especially the parents, don't talk. don't talk no matter what. Now, I hope Elizabeth can talk to them. I want answers too, as much as she does, as much as Ian does, but I think there's plausible reasons for that. I don't think that that's necessarily indicative of something that, the prosecution and the FBI is forcing. I think it's more likely that the defense doesn't want them to talk, especially the parents, because they were involved in, the FBI's case about how this guy got recognized and turned himself in the first place.
Like, why is this guy so protected? If he's just a random kid that randomly shot Charlie Kirk because he was mad that day, or he hated him for like months and months, this guy is not a threat then. He already did what he wanted to do. What is the deal with the secrecy? What do you think?
I mean, there's a whole other dimension to it too, where we were told at first that he confessed to his parents, essentially, and then that his parents turned him in willfully, and then that it came out that actually, no, that's not exactly what happened, according to Governor Cox. Actually, he kind of confessed to his parents, and then they kind of decided to turn him in with the help of their law enforcement buddy. But then actually Tyler did not confess to law enforcement, which is like, okay, so how do you even have him? How did you arrest him if he didn't confess? Because
he was still wanted for murder, and they had enough evidence linking him to that murder, whether when he got to that sheriff's department or police office, like, he confessed or not. I mean, that's immaterial. They were under a nationwide manhunt for this guy, and because he didn't say it once he got apprehended, doesn't mean they weren't still going to arrest him. They would have arrested him outside of the police office or sheriff's department if they could have identified this guy regardless if he walked in. But yeah, the parents did, play a role in identifying him. That's what the FBI documents say. Now, we'll see if the defense team contests that. If they don't contest that, it's pretty damning for him. If you have this family that seems pretty close-knit, despite, maybe having some issues with his political turn and his turn toward, a gay relationship with Lance Twigg, it doesn't really seem to explain why they'd want to ruin his life forever, especially if they're not talking in accordance with a defense wish, with a possible chance of leveraging or coming to a deal with the prosecution to escape the death penalty. I think that's plausible, and that explains why, even if he walked in and was willing to turn himself in, as he told his Discord group that we have from leaks in addition to what the FBI is saying, the FBI didn't mention that Discord leak that Turkey Tom spoke to recently, it would make sense. They would still apprehend this guy if they had evidence that he was the one they were looking for, regardless of whether he said that when he was walking in.
Exactly.
Then you're just allowed to arrest people if their parents say they did a crime?
Someone said it.
Is their parents saying that they did a crime enough to arrest someone? We were told he confessed. We were told his parents turned him in, and that it's all gravy, right? And when you actually look into Lance Twiggs and Tyler Robinson's online profiles and their history, things that their friends are telling us about them, if that was the true story, case closed, right? The parents should be at least, somewhere available for comment or for access. Or it's not like they should be out telling the whole story, but they should be around, and they're not.
The defense team would not want them to be out telling the whole story if it coincides in any way with the FBI narrative. This I just totally disagree with. They would not want that. They would want them to shut their mouths, especially if they believe they have a chance to get this kid out of the death penalty. And maybe that's their consideration. But that I just don't agree with. Yeah, that's what I'll say about that. That part I really disagree with.
Lance Twiggs should be around, and he's not, seeing as he's the key witness in the whole story as far as we know. He has disappeared completely. And so it's not so much that there's a smoking gun that proves that there's a cover-up, but it's that if there wasn't a cover-up, none of these things would be happening. It would be just smooth sailing.
I don't agree. Again, the defense would not want key witnesses that are part of the FBI's case against this guy to speak up to media right now if there wasn't a cover-up. I just totally disagree with this. And if you're a defense lawyer and you really want the best for this client, I know nothing about his defense team, but if I was trying to fight for this guy and it really was the guy, I would tell the parents to shut up, especially if they're the ones that turned him in, and conduct a legal strategy based upon how do we get around this, evidence that the parents played a role in turning him in. Same thing with the text messages. If I can't refute those through defensive subpoena power, access to Twiggs' phone, and Tyler's phone, both of which the defense would have access to if it's presented in trial. I can't disrupt that. I wouldn't want the parents to be able to talk about that, or Twig to be able to talk about that. What if Twig slips that this is right? That adds to the prosecution's case. So if I'm the defense, I don't want people close to this guy talking, even if there isn't a cover-up and this is the guy.
So there's just so many questions that it all brings up.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about this Lance Twig guy. He, to me, is the biggest suspect. Like, I don't know what this guy's up to, but trust me when I tell you, I've spoken to every lead investigator I could find. And just to connect this story, maybe someone works in their own ways and, they release the witness early. Maybe someone likes to, keep the parents in a hotel so there's no clown show around them. I asked everyone, Jan, to tell me a story that works here. Just tell me a story that works and makes sense, right? None of them were able to.
Well, I just can't agree with that last part. I mean, there's a chance that he has foreknowledge and more involvement than the text messages indicate. We don't have that evidence. I would like that evidence to be presented if so. But a lot of this crowd that has, a problem with the official narrative, I'm one of them in some regards, by the way. I think the George Zinn thing is especially crazy. The Mike McCoy, having a phone call right away, walking away from Charlie Kirk once he was shot, that doesn't completely comport to what I think too. There's holes in this, to be honest, and the FBI shouldn't be trusted. But at the same time, what is linking Lance Twig to this more than Tyler Robinson? Because a lot of that crowd says, hey, look at that video. That doesn't look like Tyler Robinson walking up those steps in that clip in that video where they have, photographs of, the shooter. But it doesn't look closer to Lance Twig than it does to Tyler Robinson anyways. And a lot of what people are going off on that is an AI rendition of that video, an AI modified version of that video. And honestly, if the FBI is correct in their indictment doc, which I'm not saying it's a given, but if the parents said they recognized him as their son, then you're just, arguing with what the parents recognized was their son. And it's their son that they raised and, grew up with, and you're debating with them at that point. If that's true, I'm not saying it has to be true. But in either case, I don't think we have the full story here. There's probably exculpatory evidence we don't have. But if this kid can't contest those text messages, if they really are real, he's going to go away for life. If he can, he's not going to be a patsy because he's going to walk. If they truly doctored these texts, it'd be very easy for defensive subpoena power to get that information from the provider. Or even if you're saying the provider was hacked, if you got access to both of those phones, Tyler's and or Lance's, the messages they have would represent the individual messages. Lots have been written about this in accordance with other trials, but the messages that you receive can't be retroactively changed on those phones by the provider. Those are stored by the device at that point. And this has come up in other cases, by the way, but that's just true. Either way, I want to hear what you guys have to say about it. What do you think are the craziest loose ends here? What do you think we need to know more about? Is Tyler involved? Is there a conspiracy in addition to Tyler we don't know about? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also subscribe to Elizabeth Lane. Good reporting, even though we don't fully agree on this. Ian, good take too. Partially agree, partially disagree with some parts of it. And if you like this video, though, please consider becoming a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below. And if you do that, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. Also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, absolutely free, click the link in the description below. You'll plug in your email. I'll send that to you as a PDF. No charge, no obligation. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.